Good morning. My name is Travis Deans, and I was supposed to speak at a men's breakfast this morning called The Big C. The Big C is a monthly men's breakfast that takes place at Northway Community Church up in Wexford, and it's an incredible thing. There's usually 250 guys, I think from like 40 different churches that come to that, and but along with many other things, it got canceled, and but I wanted to share this message anyway because I really feel like it will be encouraging in the world we live in today, the times that we're living in. So this is called Courageous Faith in a Dangerous World, and it's from the book of Daniel. And I usually share this message with high school students because we try to I work with a ministry called Teens for Christ, and we encourage high school students. We try to inspire them from God's word to boldly live out their faith in their high schools. But I really believe that this message will apply to all of us, and so I wanted to share with you. This is going to be kind of the 5-minute, or as close to 5 minutes as I can, version of this. And so here we go. So Daniel and his friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they're taken from Jerusalem to Babylon. And right away, they're put into school because they're going to be taught the Babylonian way of doing things. And while they're there, something happens. Daniel 1 verse 11, Daniel said, the guard tells him, hey, here's your food. Here's what you're going to eat. Right? And Daniel said to the guard, whom the chief official had appointed over them, please test your servants for 10 days. Give us nothing but vegetables to eat and water to drink, and then compare our appearance with that of the young men who eat the royal food, and treat your servants in accordance with what you see. So he agreed to this. At the end of the 10 days, they looked healthier and better nourished than any of the young men who ate the royal food. So the guard took away their choice food and wine that they were given to drink and gave them vegetables instead. The Jewish people, they had these laws that they followed about what they could and couldn't eat. Laws that God had given them about what foods were clean and unclean. And in this circumstance, this was not an ideal situation. They were not in their homeland. They were not in a place where they could worship God the way that God had prescribed. But nevertheless, Daniel wanted to honor God, even in something as basic as what he was eating, right? I mean, food is it's just an everyday thing. It's kind of mundane. We just eat whatever without a whole lot of thought to it. But Daniel wanted to honor God even in this most basic thing. And when he did so, they looked better nourished than all the young men who ate the royal food. So those guys are eating cheeseburgers and pizza and ribs and everything. And Daniel and his friends are eating vegetables, and and they look better and healthier than anyone else. So I guess our parents were right. Veggies are good for us. But, we need to choose to honor God in all circumstances. Let me put that up there. In times that are crazy, in times that are confusing, when we don't know what's going on or what to do, we can still purposefully choose to honor God in every possible way that we can. And listen to what happens at the end of the time, this training time that they go through. They go before the king. The king talks with them, and it says in verse 19, he found none equal to Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So they entered the king's service. They went to school. They got a job. In every matter of wisdom and understanding about which the king questioned them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and enchanters in his whole kingdom. So Daniel and his friends, they were excellent at what they did. They did their very best. And that's another thing that honors God. When we give our best, when we do whatever we do with excellence, it gives God glory. It brings honor to God. Mediocrity does not honor God. And that doesn't mean we have to live up to someone else's standards, but we need to do our very best, right? And so whether that's at school, whether that's at work, no matter what you're doing, if we do our very best, it honors God. And so, no matter what the times are that we find ourselves living in, no matter what the circumstances of the world, we can always choose to purposefully honor God. So that brings us to Daniel chapter 2. And Nebuchadnezzar, who was the king, has this dream. And he dreams about a giant statue. And the statue is made up of different kinds of metal. And so Nebuchadnezzar wants to know, what does this mean? Why did I have this dream? So he goes to all of his advisors, the magicians, his servants, his all the astrologers, all the guys who were supposed to, tell him give him wisdom and all of that. He says, I want you guys to tell me the meaning of this dream I had, but first you must tell me what the dream was. And of course they say, that's impossible. We can't do that. You have to tell us what the dream was. Then we can tell you what it means, right? And probably all of you've probably all been in a situation where you ask a question and someone gives an answer and you're like, you have no idea what you're talking about, do you? Right? We've all been in that situation. Guilty. The king knows if he tells them what the dream was, they could make up anything. So he gets pretty angry. In fact, he's going to put all of these guys to death if they don't tell him the dream and what it means. So Daniel hears about this. He hears about what's happening, that the king is going to kill everybody and turn their houses into rubble. He was a little extreme. And so Daniel goes to the king and says, King, please give me a chance. I think I can help you. And so he goes and he asks his friends to pray for him, and he asks God to reveal the meaning of the dream. And so then Daniel goes back to Nebuchadnezzar and says, chapter 2, verse 27, Daniel replied, no wise man, enchanter, magician, or diviner can explain for the king the mystery he's asked about. But there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries, and he has shown King Nebuchadnezzar what will happen in the days to come. Nebuchadnezzar was dreaming about the future. He was dreaming about empires that were going to come and about the coming of the King of Kings who would rule over all empires, over all kingdoms. He says, as your majesty was lying there, your mind turned to things to come, and the revealer of mystery showed you what is going to happen. And then Daniel describes the statue that Nebuchadnezzar dreamed about. Its head was of pure gold, its chest was of silver, its belly and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, and so on. Then he says, this is the cool part, while you were watching, a rock was cut out, but not by human hands. It struck the statue on its feet and smashed it. Then the iron and clay, the bronze and silver and gold were all broken to pieces and became like chaff on a threshing floor. But the rock that struck the statue became a huge mountain and filled the whole earth. Nebuchadnezzar was dreaming about the coming of Jesus. But anyway, here's the thing. Daniel, he had compassion for everyone who he worked with was about to be killed. Nebuchadnezzar was on a rampage. He was about to destroy these guys. And Daniel compassionately goes to the king and says, let me speak God's truth to you. God has given you this dream. God will reveal the truth of it to you. Let me share that with you. And all of us are surrounded by people who are living in confusion. All of us are surrounded by people who just don't know what's going on in the world, don't understand why the world's so crazy, what is happening, what does it all mean? And as followers of Jesus Christ, we need to be willing to compassionately share the truth of God with them. When I was in high school, my band director came in the band room one day, and this was just one of those moments that I wish I had taken advantage of this moment, and I didn't. But he came in the band room and he said, I just don't know what life is about anymore. Man, how I wish I would have said, can I tell you what life is about? Can I share with you why life is hard and why it's confusing and what it means and how there's a God who loves you? I wish I would have taken advantage of that moment. So I try to let that remind me to never miss those opportunities to help speak God's truth into people's lives especially when things are confusing and unclear and don't make any sense. So that brings us to Daniel chapter 3. And this is a story that we all love. It's that we're familiar with. We love it. It's so good. It's a story of the fiery furnace. And so Nebuchadnezzar builds this giant statue. Maybe he was inspired by that dream he had. But he builds this giant statue, and then he commands everyone at the signal, at the sound of the music. He's going to play this music, and at the sound, everyone's going to bow down and worship this giant statue. And of course, his Jewish servants cannot do that. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they won't bow down to that statue. And so it says Nebuchadnezzar was furious with rage, and he summons Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So they were brought before him. And he says, "Is it true that you do not serve my gods or worship the image of gold that I have set up?" Now, when you hear the sound of the music, if you're ready to bow down and worship the image I made, very good. He's going to give him another chance here. "But if you do not worship it, you will be thrown immediately into a blazing furnace, and then what God will be able to rescue you from my hand?" So they reply to him, and this is so great. It's not obnoxious. It's not it's very humble, very humbly. They say, "King Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace," they're willing to take the consequences for their actions. "If we're thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from your majesty's hand. But even if he does not, we want you to know, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up." Now you know how the story goes. Nebuchadnezzar is just enraged with these guys and their responses. So he commands that the furnace be heated up 7 times hotter than normal. I don't know what kind of fuel he used to do that, jet fuel or something, I'm not sure, but 7 times hotter than usual. And the guys who throw them in the fire actually get killed in the process of doing that. And they look into the fire, and Nebuchadnezzar says, "Whoa, what is that? I see 4 guys walking around in there, and one of them looks like the son of the gods." Well, it was partially right. I think it was the son of God in there with them. And so he commands them to come out. Not only are they not burned up, not only are their clothes not burned, they don't even smell like smoke, right? And that's pretty amazing. I mean, if you've ever been around a campfire for 5 minutes, you know it's impossible not to smell like smoke when you've been around a fire. So they come out, and Nebuchadnezzar says, "Praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They trusted him and defied the king's command. They were willing to give up their lives rather than worship or serve any god but their own." And so Nebuchadnezzar acknowledges that they serve the one true living God. Folks, in times that are confusing and crazy and we don't know what's going on, we need to humbly refuse to worship idols. Now, chances are there's nobody going to set up a golden statue somewhere and say, "Bow down and worship this statue." But, in America today, we have become proficient at idol worship. There are so many things that we give ultimate importance to. Think about it. Money, power, success, fame, possessions, status. There's just all kind of things, and even family, right? There's all kind of things that we give our allegiance, our primary allegiance to. There's all kind of things as Americans that we pursue with all of our energy and strength and might that we give ourselves to, when in fact we should be worshiping the God who made us above everything else, right? And so, like these 3 guys, we need to say, "You know what? I'm not going to worship the things that the people around me worship. I'm going to worship the God who made me, the God who loves me, the God who commands my allegiance." We need to humbly refuse to bow down and worship the idols of the culture around us. And they are all around us. Just watch TV for 10 minutes and you'll see a bunch of them. So humbly refuse to worship the idols of the world around us. And that's especially, in times that are confusing and crazy. It's really hard. It's really hard not to get caught up in the frenzy, right? It's not really hard not to react with fear and not to react with just that sense of foreboding. We need to put our trust and hope in God at times like this. Even in Daniel or Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they were like, "You know what? No matter what happens, even if we die in this fiery furnace, we trust in God." And friends, no matter what happens to us, do we trust in our God? Because If we cannot trust in our God, then we are not worshiping him. If we cannot put our hope in our God, then we are not worshiping him. We are trusting in something else. And if there's something else you're trusting in, you're going to be let down. You're going to be disappointed. You're going to be, your life is going to be a mess, because only God holds our lives in his hands, right? We know that. Okay, so that brings us to the last thing, and this is in Daniel chapter 6. And these stories, they're just such great stories, right? This is the story of Daniel in the lion's den. And so Daniel is an old man by now, and the kingdom has been turned over. It's no longer Babylon. It's the kingdom of the Persians and the Medes. And so Daniel finds himself in a situation where his fellow co-workers are jealous of him, and they want to destroy him. They want to bring him down, but they can't find any corruption in his life. They can't find anything to accuse him of. That's an interesting thing, right? If somebody wanted to accuse us of something, of doing wrong, could they find anything? That's a good question, right? So they say to themselves, look, we can't, there's nothing we can accuse him of other than his religious beliefs. So they go after that. And so they get the king to sign a decree. You remember the story. To sign a decree that nobody can pray to any god but King Darius. Only the king can be prayed to. So what does Daniel do? I mean, he's a man of faith. He's a man of, his faith is the most important thing in his life. I mean, he ate vegetables because of his faith. So what does he do? It says in chapter 6, verse 10, now when Daniel learned that the decree had been published, he went home and hid from everyone. No, it doesn't say that. He went home and changed everything he used to do. Nope, doesn't say that either. It says he went home to his upstairs room where the windows opened toward Jerusalem. 3 times a day he got down on his knees and prayed, giving thanks to his God just as he had done before. He wasn't going to change. He wasn't going to stop expressing, living out his faith, even though it was illegal now to pray and to express his faith. Friends, we're being told in our country today that it's illegal to do so many things, and folks, that is just not true. There are so many things that as believers we are allowed to express our faith, but we're being told it's not. We're being told separation of church and state, and of course that's a talk for another time. But the point is, what I want to encourage us with is that we need to courageously express our faith, live out our faith, even when we're told it's illegal, even when we're told that we're not allowed to. Daniel courageously knelt down and prayed. Now that wasn't obnoxious. He didn't do it out in public and make a spectacle of himself. He did it in the window of his own home. But nevertheless, he courageously did what he always did. He prayed. And of course, he had this, they caught him doing that. They took him before the king. The king suddenly realized this was a trap. They were trying to trap Daniel, and he was distressed over the whole thing. But he couldn't break his own law without compromising his authority. And so he has Daniel thrown into the lion's den. And some of us out there, we might feel like we're in a lion's den right now. You might feel like you're in a situation at work or a situation at school. You might feel like you're in a lion's den right now, just like Daniel was. You might feel like you're in a situation that's dangerous. You're in a situation that is, or maybe it's not dangerous as much as just precarious. Daniel was thrown into the lion's den, and the king could not sleep all night. And so finally in the morning, he goes to the lion's den, and the king says, Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to rescue you from the lions? And I'm sure he was so glad to hear this voice. Daniel answered back, may the king live forever. My God sent his angels, and he shut the mouths of the lions. They have not hurt me, because I was found innocent in his sight, nor have I ever done any wrong before you, your majesty. And the king was overjoyed and gave orders to lift Daniel out of the den. And when they lifted him out of the den, no wound was found on him, because he had trusted in his God. sometimes God allows us to go through things that are frightening. Sometimes God allows us to go through things that seem disastrous, that are dangerous. But here's the cool thing, folks. God goes through those things with us. God was with Daniel in the lion's den. He kept the mouths of those lions shut. He was with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in that fire. You might feel like you're going through the fire today. You might feel like you're in the lion's den today. You might feel like you're about to go through one of those things. But God goes with us. He could have prevented those things from happening. He could have stopped Daniel from being thrown in the lion's den. He could have stopped Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego from being thrown in the fire, but he didn't. He let them go through that difficult time. However, he went through it with them. And now we have these incredible stories that we still tell, 2,500 years later. We're still telling these incredible stories because they trusted in their God. They trusted in God to take care of them. They trusted in God to be with them. And friends, we can truly have a courageous faith in dangerous times. And these guys modeled that kind of faith for us. And so I just want to encourage us today. We live in uncertain times right now. The next month or so, who knows what's going to happen? Who knows what it's going to bring? Whether you think it's deadly serious or whether you think it's just hype and all of that, either way, things are happening that we are in some uncharted territory, and we don't know how this is all going to play out. But we can trust in our God. And if we love God, if we love our neighbors, just like Jesus said, the greatest commandments, love God, love your neighbors. If we do those two things, even through the difficult times, even through the uncertain times, even through fearful times, we know that God will be with us. We know that God will help us, that God will use us, that God will make a difference through us. Again, my name is Travis Deans. I work with a ministry called Teens for Christ, student outreach clubs. Thank you so much for your time this morning. If you found this message encouraging, I hope you'll share it with somebody. And thank you for listening today. And just pray that God will be with you, that God will bless you. Thank you so much.